Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 43. I'm going to talk about Scream of the Wolf from 1974. I watched this on Tubi. I had not seen this before. Let's start with the prominent crew and cast. This film was directed by Dan Curtis, written by Richard Matheson, with effects makeup by Michael Westmore. This is a stacked crew. Dan Curtis was a major writer, director, and producer in the 70s and 80s. He directed The Winds of War in 1983, the most watched television miniseries in American history. He was also a televised horror maestro. His works include, but are not limited to, Dark Shadows, both the series and several of the movies, and a pair of Kolchak TV movies. Richard Matheson is likewise a giant in horror fiction. I could spend a lot of time listing amazing novels, stories, and movies Matheson has written, but I'll limit myself to my favorite three: I Am Legend, The Twilight Zone, and Star Trek, the original series. Seriously, the man is a legend. We've discussed Michael Westmore's family before. Michael is part of the legendary Westmore family. His Uncle Bud did the effects work on Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. He's got brothers, kids, nieces, and nephews in the business. He's best known for his incredible work on Star Trek, including The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and multiple movies. He's responsible for developing the makeup for the Ferengi, Cardassians, and the Jem'Hadar, among others. But he's got a ton of other film work outside sci-fi and horror under his belt as well. He did makeup for multiple Rocky and Rambo movies, for Pete's sake. I'm almost certainly missing something else major that he's worked on. Plus, we're going to see his work again on this project. This is by no means the only werewolf movie that Michael Westmore worked on. The cast is likewise amazing. Peter Graves plays John Weatherby. Clint Walker plays Byron Douglas. Joanne Flugg plays Sandy Miller. Philip Carey played Sheriff Vernon Bell. And Don Megawan plays Grant. I was really excited to see that we got a Peter Graves werewolf movie. Peter was in the Air Force in World War II before going into acting. His career spanned over 50 years. His brother, James Arness, also acted in the same period. Peter has over 140 credited acting roles. He's probably best known for his role in Mission Impossible and the Airplane movies. I think this is the only werewolf movie he's ever appeared in. He's also the shortest man of the major cast at a mere 6 foot 3 inches tall. Tall cast, right? Clint Walker is sometimes credited with kickstarting the Western craze on television with his role as Cheyenne Bodie on the TV show Cheyenne. One of his early roles was in the seminal Cecil B. DeMille movie, The Ten Commandments. Another notable appearance included The Dirty Dozen. Although she did mostly television, Joanne Flugg exploded to stardom after appearing in MASH. Like a lot of other actors we talk about, Philip Carey got his start in westerns and army movies. What is unusual is that his most famous role is probably his last, appearing in 108 episodes of One Life to Live. And it's nice to see Don Megawan again. We last saw him 20 years ago as the sheriff in The Werewolf from 1956. Unfortunately, I wish I could recommend this movie. The movie tackles a brand new and intriguing theme that I am excited to discuss. The film is part of the subgroup of project films that lean into the concept of the werewolf but don't actually have a lycanthrope in it. I'll explain that after the synopsis. And the crew is impeccable, but the print available on Tubi shows significant damage to the film stock. It's most visible the darker the scene is, and since a lot of this movie happens at night, it's unfortunately a major detriment to the visual quality of the movie. It makes me really sad. We'll discuss film damage later in the video as well. So let's tackle that synopsis. A man's driving a convertible down a foggy road at night and runs out of gas. He exits his car and walks down the road in search of help. He hears a growl, sees something sinister, and runs. He manages to get back to his car, but the unseen attacker tears the convertible top to gain access to its victim. The windows are shattered and the scene fades to black. Title and credits appear over police cars driving along a dirt road. The scene looks like a cop convention. Sheriff Vernon Bell examines the scene of the crime. Later, the sheriff drives up to the bluff-top, oceanside home of John Weatherby, a retired hunter. Bell wants John to look at the animal tracks found at the scene and provide some clues as to what kind of animal is responsible. John's best guess is a wolf, but a very large one. He suggests Bell consult with Byron Douglas. Bell informs John that he tried Byron first, but he was too busy. Bloodhounds brought in to track the animal are unsuccessful. It seems the animal changed its scent somehow. John drives his red Corvette into town to see Sandy Miller, who works at a local coffee shop. Sandy is miffed that John hasn't called or come to see her. His excuse is that he's busy working on a book. They patch things up. A man walks alone on a lowly stretch of road at night. He hears growling, then sees something and begins to run. He's chased down and killed. Ben and John examine the victim. John is shocked. His whole face is gone. The pair follow the animal's tracks and notice that their appearance changes. The animal ran on all fours at one point, then it started walking on its hind legs. John walks a little further and notes the prints just disappear. John tells Bell he will consult Byron on the matter. John adds that the animal changes its weight when it changes its form of locomotion. John drives to the home of his former friend and hunting partner. He hears someone out chopping wood. Without checking to see who it is, Byron says, "I thought you might come around." Byron tells John he's preparing for his next hunting trip, this time to South America. John notices a familiar face on the stairs, Grant, and says hello. Byron asks about the killer animal. John comes to the real point of his visit. Help me find it. Byron claims he has too much work to do in preparation for his upcoming trip. Byron warns that the killings will continue. That evening, a young man and woman make out on the floor of a cabin. They hear something outside and investigate. The girl screams as something crashes through the window and attacks. John and Sandy are in a nearly empty restaurant and remark that it's unusually empty. Sandy asks why Byron won't help. John doesn't understand how Byron can resist the challenge. Byron enters the restaurant and joins them at their table. Byron reminds John that the animal will kill again and then needles Sandy. Byron shows clear contempt for Sandy and perhaps all women. Byron is a creepy dude. Byron raises the possibility that the killer might be a werewolf. A bearded man smoking a pipe walks over to verbally confront Byron because he is a hunter. The man is taken aback when Byron stands up and intimidates and threatens the man. John gets between Byron and his terrified prey as the man runs off. John drives Sandy home. She is perplexed as to why John keeps making excuses for Byron. John tells a story of Byron hunting a man-killing wolf with a single bullet in his rifle so that the animal would have a chance. John adds that Byron was seriously wounded by that wolf. At home, Sandy prepares for bed. She hears a door creak and investigates. She calls John and tells him that there are prowlers outside. She hears a crash and finds one of her doors splintered open. She's chased into her own bedroom. Small holes are punched into the bedroom door, all the while scratching and growling sounds add to her terror. John pulls up to the house the same time as the police arrive. The deputy tells John that Sandy is safe. Bell sits with Sandy when John enters the bedroom. Sheriff Bell hypothesizes that the police presence must have scared the attacker off. Sandy never saw the attacker. We see multiple doors practically chewed or clawed apart. They follow tracks to the ocean below a cliff. John tells Bell that they need to hunt the animal. The sheriff suggests trapping it instead. Bell also tells John he is imposing a curfew and that he expects John to respect it. John tells Sandy she should stay with him for a while, and she nods in agreement. John drives Sandy to his house and then goes out into the night to hunt for the animal. John encounters Bell on his hunt. Bell reminds John forcefully about the curfew. The next morning, John visits Sandy at the coffee shop. The newspaper headline reads, "Werewolf Killer Still at Large." John reproaches Sandy for calling the sheriff on him, and Sandy admits to John that she thinks Byron is responsible for the killings. Bell interrupts their exchange and asks John about the werewolf comment by Sandy. Bell invites John to join him later for another chat with Byron. A limping Grant approaches and then stares out the window of Byron's home. John, Bell, and Byron talk on the patio. Bell again asks Byron for help, and again Byron refuses. Bell is both surprised and angered by Byron's indifference to 4 neighbors being killed. Byron admits he kind of enjoys the situation. As John walks away in disgust, Byron warns him, "John, just in case you're thinking about going after that animal yourself, a good hunter is never sure of anything, except that his prey will do the unexpected." Bell decides to stake out Byron's house for the night. His deputy, Charlie, relieves him later. Charlie decides that inspecting the basement is in order. As he prowls about, he hears a door open and then a chain rattling. He opens a door only to be confronted by an animal. He steps back and fires his service revolver at the approaching menace. John later walks through the brush and hears a wolf howl. He spots a sheriff badge on Charlie's corpse with its throat torn open. The next morning, the police hold a press conference. A news reporter asks about the killings and what the sheriff is doing about them. Bell informs the public that the governor has declared the area in a state of emergency. The National Guard is being dispatched. Another reporter asks sarcastically, armed with silver bullets? Bell reminds the reporters that 5 people have been killed and the National Guard will arrive in 3 days. A smirking Byron joins Bell, John, and Sandy outside town hall. After Byron has his say about how happy he is to see people in fear, Sandy reiterates her belief in Byron's involvement. John drives out to Byron's house again and is greeted in the courtyard by Grant. Inside the house, Byron finally explains his reluctance to get involved. He tells John, "Because I hate to see you so much less of a man than you were, because I was hoping that letting you work on the problem unaided might help you to regain some portion of your once consummate skills as a hunter." John is flabbergasted. Byron invites John to arm wrestle. Byron makes John a deal. "If you can hold my arm for 1 minute, I'll help you." The pair wrestle as the stopwatch Byron is holding ticks away. It's a struggle for John, and he loses just before the minute is up. John drives home. He tells Sandy that Byron still refuses to help. John has dinner, then loads a rifle. Before he can leave the house, the doorbell rings. Byron is at the door and proclaims that he's changed his mind. Sandy begs John not to go with Byron. Byron winks at Sandy after insinuating a threat. Byron and John drive into the woods. Byron plays devil's advocate and argues it might be a werewolf. They separate and begin hunting the animal. John hears a shot from a rifle and then growling. He turns to the sound, sees a body, and thinks that the dead man is Byron. He hears the howl of a wolf. John follows the animal tracks back to Byron's house, convinced Grant killed Byron and the other victims. He cautiously enters the house and calls out to Grant. He announces he found Byron's body and is surprised to hear Byron's voice respond. Byron orders John to put down his rifle. John realizes he saw Grant's body in Byron's clothes. Grant threatened to tell the police about Byron. Byron orders John into the basement at gunpoint. Byron confesses that he and Grant staged everything. In the basement is a chained up large dog barking fiercely. Byron explains his reasons, which include bringing John back into his life and spreading terror among the normies. Byron tosses John an empty rifle and tells him to go to the clearing where he found the deputy's body. He explains that there is a shell box there with 2 rounds, one for the dog and one for Byron. John gets a 5-minute head start for Byron's version of the most dangerous game. John tries to walk away from his insane former friend, but is threatened with immediate death by the dog. Byron starts his stopwatch. John finds the shells and loads the rifle. The dog approaches and John fires. John misses with the first shot, but the second finds its target. Up on the hillside, Byron announces, "It's hand to hand now, John." John drops the empty rifle and wanders into the brush. Byron ambushes John, jumping from a tree. When the victorious Byron approaches John to finish him off, John surprises the great hunter. John holds a loaded revolver. Pretty sneaky, John. Byron doesn't think John has it in him to kill an unarmed man. Byron walks up the hill despite John pleading with him not to leave. John reminds Byron of his own advice that the prey will always do the unexpected. John shoots Byron in the back with a single shot. Byron stumbles down the hill in an attack mode and is finished by John with one final shot. End credits roll as John walks away from Byron's dead body. So there is no werewolf, so no transformation or werewolf lore. The villain of the piece deliberately fabricated evidence that emulates werewolf attacks, partially to cause and heighten terror in the local populace, partially to obscure his role in the killings, and partially to test and draw out his former partner. I am a little surprised it took until 1974 for a movie thematically about lycanthropes to use the metaphor to examine hunters and hunting. This film presents us with 3 professional hunters, each with an ethical position on hunting. Oh, and an interesting confrontation with a hunting critic. So let's see what we can tease out from these 3 different individuals. Byron is the villain of the piece. As such, Byron has got to be wrong, either in motives, in method, or in both. If he wasn't, he would be an antagonist, but not a villain. Byron's position on hunting is clear. Passionate emotions, including fear and terror, are evidence of truly being in the moment, taking life by the horns, so to speak. Byron's entire stated motives for his plan are to wake up the populace with terror and to re-engage John in the thrill of the hunt. I'll discuss this in more detail in a second. However, I suspect the real motive was more in line with a simple desire to hunt human prey. Everything else is just a justification. This doesn't necessarily mean that the movie is anti-hunting, just that Byron makes a poor case for hunting. I also wanted to talk about the attempted social condemnation of Byron. His accuser certainly presents as something of a stereotypical 70s bleeding heart liberal academic hippie type, funky sideburns, sports jacket with elbow patches over a turtleneck, puffing on a pipe. He is confident he has the superior moral position and that Byron is unethical just for killing anything. Confident enough to butt into a stranger's conversation, confident that his opinion matters. What interests me most is that Byron doesn't even try to defend hunting. He moves straight to veiled threats, both validating the criticism from the guide, but also demonstrating that that criticism is coming from a place of unearned safety. The accuser doesn't kill because he doesn't have to, and therefore he can choose not to. Others kill for him, and because Byron's accuser has abandoned the very idea of violence, he suddenly and unexpectedly finds himself the potential target of violence. We know the least about Grant's ethical approach to hunting. We know he was ultimately going to turn Byron into the authorities, which is why Byron had to kill him. We don't know how much he may have helped Byron out to that point, but he was clearly on board with Byron's attitudes towards hunting and killing animals in general. I suspect he agreed with Byron's position on passion being the sign of a truly lived life, but drew the line at causing terror to bring the slumbering masses to their senses. Now, finally, John is our hero and also the only retired hunter. He's presented as a good and moral man, justifiably upset and concerned at the loss of life. As the hero, he is the positive mirror of Byron, but he doesn't present a strong ethical pro-hunting argument. This does feel like a missed opportunity. He has chances to do so. That lack does make it feel like the filmmakers themselves aren't very familiar with hunting and hunters and hunting culture, but I have no other basis for reaching that conclusion. That's just an assumption I'm coming to. I did want to address Byron's claim that strong emotions of any type are what makes animals, including humans, truly alive. First, let's discuss why that's kind of true. Human beings are emotional animals. Feeling emotions intensely is feeling more. There are plenty of examples of these kinds of experiences. Soldiers returning from combat zones express that the civilian world feels flat, gray, and fake. The rush of adrenaline can be addictive, and when it goes away, we feel it. This can lead some people to seek out activities that trigger the release of even more adrenaline. But second, let's discuss the ways in which this is false. Byron seems to limit his definition of strong emotion to fear and terror, ignoring the many other positive emotions. You can be truly alive while going on a date, playing music, dancing, or just quietly enjoying a beautiful landscape, among thousands of other experiences. None require the individual to be balanced between life and death. Also, being too emotional is a thing that can hinder or limit a person. You aren't more alive if you're crippled with fear or anxiety. Additionally, the film ignores or is unaware that for many hunters, taking their prey in a single instant shot is a sign of skill. A talented hunter's prey never suffers the terror of impending death. It simply happens. The hunter may experience a heightened state of awareness at that moment, acutely aware of the fragility and temporary reality of life, but the same does not necessarily hold true for the prey, which is why I doubt Byron's stated motives. He wanted to feel more. He had grown tired of killing mere animals, even dangerous predators and big game. He justified his desires, and that's a pretty common human nature. Next, let's talk about the damaged print. It's obvious watching the movie that the original film stock must have been damaged before it was digitized. Film stock damage is caused by a variety of factors, both environmental and mechanical, but one significant cause is improper storage conditions. Exposure to high temperatures, humidity, and fluctuations in either of those environmental factors can lead to the deterioration of film stock. Initially, the damage manifests as minor degradations and as defects visible in the print, which is what we're seeing here. Over time, the emulsion layer, which contains the image, can become brittle, warped, or discolored, rendering the film unusable. Additionally, poor storage conditions may encourage the growth of mold or fungus, further compromising the film's integrity. It's a little surprising to me to see this kind of damage on a film released about 50 years ago. I felt like this kind of damage was a thing from the first half of last century. Obviously, it's not. And there are lots of film historians working on preserving old movies, which is great. So that's the good news. So if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Share your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing The Beast Must Die from 1974. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back here next episode.